welcome to KCWM's Ministry Book Club. We are continuing Babies Are Not Pizzas. This is our second to last, so we are on chapter 7, and we did 7, 8, and 9 this month. So thank you for coming today, Jamie. Even though it's Labor Day, so much dedication. Okay, so in chapter 7, she starts talking about the journey to changing birth culture. There are lots of children at my house, by the way, so it will come in and out. There's nothing to be done, but that is life. So it's going to happen. So how do you work to change birth culture in your area? And do you find a response similar to Rebecca's? And Rebecca's response was, she described it as like, some people that were already trying to change birth culture were super interested, but then the hospitals where they're trying to change the birth culture didn't even bother to show up.
Yeah, I'd say that's fairly accurate.
That's about it. That's the experience right there.
Yeah. I mean, we have like this subculture that is trying to make a difference and make things change. It's just kind of this upstream battle going on that fighting the policies that have just been in place for so long, and providers that have it just these old practices really ingrained in their minds. I mean, the average is that it takes 15 years for like evidence-based practices to be enacted. So yeah,
and I mostly just get frustrated when I don't even see an attempt at, like, we're reaching out, we're trying to perpetrate change, and then like zero interest in doing so. And that to me is, it's baffling when I encounter it, and it's really nice when I encounter the opposite. You know, you go to these places where you're trying to enact this change, and maybe it doesn't happen, but maybe they were at least slightly receptive to it, which is, you know, progress being made, at least kind of, I think.
Yeah, we always have to look on the bright side with that.
The difference between like for example, I was at a birth like 4 or 5 days ago, you know, overnight birth, so what do you want to call it what it was. 4 or 5 days ago, and mom wanted to push on her hands and knees, and the medical staff was like super uncomfortable with it at first, and the nurse turns to the midwife and she goes, "Is that okay?" And I was like, "Is that okay? What are you going to do? Flip her?" Like, yeah, good luck with that. Not with me standing here, you won't. But the doctor, she goes, "Well, I guess a midwife, sorry." She's like, "I guess, you know, I haven't done that before, but I can try it." And I was like, "Yes, you can try it." And, you know, a few pushes and whatnot. And then she was like, "Yeah, I'm not into this." But I mean, she tried it. She experienced it kind of. And then we did some side pushing, you know, and that was still outside of her comfort zone, but it was like a compromise of like, not on the back, not on hands and knees. There's an in-between where she's a little bit more used to it, but progress was kind of made, you know. I mean, she's still kind of like ended up.
I mean, at least she was introduced to the idea, and maybe the next time it happens, she'll be more comfortable with it.
That's what I'm hoping, and not like, yeah, I tried this before and it didn't work.
Yeah.
Well, no, but you know, it's like you have to be exposed to it so many times, because I mean, how many births has this person done? And this is the first time that she's ever had someone request a birth on hands and knees.
It's like, I imagine that it's something similar to, I know that there's this rule with trying foods that you have to at least try something 3 times before you know if you like it or not. And I feel like this is probably pretty similar.
Yes,
like mentality.
Perfect. Yes, I agree. That's a great analogy. My dog's excited about something. Okay. Have you witnessed or experienced situations similar to the pages described at the bottom of page 127? So I will go to page 127 and we will read this and then we will discuss it.
All right.
Okay, even local hospitals with better reputations had limitations, including unpredictable care and restrictive policies. A nursing student had told me she'd witnessed a doctor cut a forced episiotomy on a first-time mom during an uncomplicated vaginal birth. The mother was pushing nicely and her perineum was gradually stretching over the baby's head. The doctor, impatient and tired of waiting, let out a big sigh, grabbed the scissors and snip, cut the woman's vagina just like that without even asking. And this was the good hospital in our area. Any experiences similar to that with a client or personally?
I mean, not with that. I haven't encountered that specific situation yet in my career, but I do. Just like being in network with a bunch of birth professionals, I do know that if you're at the good hospital, there are people that have some bad experiences. Sometimes you get that rogue care provider that's having a bad day. And the opposite can be true even at a hospital that maybe has a worse reputation. Yeah. It's sometimes you get it can be hard to predict sometimes, but you encounter these providers that are just they're having a bad day and they are just, or they've just probably been in the field for too long, where they're starting to it's just a job, and their patients are dehumanized because they have this mindset of a patient instead of a human being. I think that just being in the field for a very long time, and it can cause some of that.
I completely agree. I think the thing that really stood out to me in this, and what I have experienced, is people who are, when it comes to doctors specifically, they're not sighing in exasperation and then doing something that they're not supposed to, or starting to, and I notice it and I say something, but they're not thinking about it. I went to the good hospital in the area and this doctor was amazing, was doing everything that my client wanted without her even having to say anything, read her birth plan in front of her and was yeah, okay, just refreshing, doing everything. And then went to do a cervical check and she withdrew consent and he left his fingers in her for what felt to me forever, because I was you're sexually assaulting my client, right in front. And so I just went, she said to get her fingers out, and he was, oh, he wasn't, he was I'm going to maliciously, or I'm so annoyed I'm going to do this, this poor person experienced in this book. But just they need to be woken up, because it's just pure habit. It's a huge portion of our job is just saying, hey, one of our fellow doulas, I was on a team with her recently, and the doctor grabbed scissors and she was just hey, what are you doing? It says no episiotomy on her birth plan. And I was oh, right. Just need to be reminded. As far as open hostility, they're actually annoyed, they're actually purposefully going against the birth plan, I've only experienced that with a select few nurses, for the most part, but that's just been my personal experience. And it might be that those nurses were experiencing a lot of horizontal violence, which is something that we're going to talk about in a bit. As far as how do I handle it, because that was part 2 of this question, is saying it out loud. before it actually. So like when the doctor sighed and reached over with the scissors, saying what you see. Why are you grabbing the scissors? That's not on the birth plan. Or, you know, if it was me personally, then just, I see you doing that, stop. A lot of times just, starting with verbalizing it, I've never had to go past that. But if you want to learn all about the steps that I recommend for that, I do teach an entire course on it. So feel more than free to jump on Udemy or sign up for our next live class, which I will schedule at some point. Rebuilding a house. Kind of busy at the moment. Okay, last question for chapter 7. Have you supported someone who was or personally been afraid to give birth at a hospital? Because Rebecca Decker does talk about, you know, in her third birth, she felt like she probably should have gone in for an induction, which everything turned out fine. But she was saddened by the fact that she was legitimately afraid to go to her own hospital for what might have been medically necessary. Is that something that you've experienced or know somebody who has experienced that?
I mean, I have supported clients that were incredibly nervous about the idea of going to a hospital and like the implications of like interventions and like the cascade of interventions and maybe the possibility of their birth plans not being honored. Usually that has led to the decision of going to a birth center or having having a home birth would be another option. If I truly believe that the best place to give birth is where you feel safest. So if a hospital makes you nervous, you have other options. If a home birth makes you nervous, you have other options. But I think most of the clients that I've supported, if they were nervous about a hospital, they went with birth center, and then maybe with a subsequent birth, then went to home birth at that point once they felt confident in their
mm-hmm. The main place that I struggle with this, besides just the fact that, you know, some people that I work with, they do have that fear put into them. And I hate it when that fear is directly, one second. I hate it when that fear comes from somebody scared them on purpose because they wanted them to choose a home birth or a birth center. I have experienced that. Or I had a client that was on track, ready to go, totally fine, working with a midwife, and we were trucking. They were getting along great. And then a doula that wasn't associated with us called her, saw her post on Facebook about something, and called her and was like, hey, these are all the things you should be afraid of for a hospital birth. What? Why would you do that? Like, that's horrible. It was so
incredibly inappropriate.
So inappropriate. Oh my gosh. I was like, if you were with my agency, association, whatever you want to call us, you would be out. I was so furious. Oh my goodness. Yeah. Then I just spent all of this time calming this poor woman down, who in the end of the phone call is like, okay, like, we've talked over all of these fears that this person gave you. Thank you. How are you feeling? She's like, I feel good about still giving birth at this hospital with this midwife. Yeah, because your birth plan matches her and her style perfectly. Mm-hmm. So this was a great match for you. You were not a great home birth candidate because she had anxiety out the wazoo, and giving birth at home would have ended in a transfer, almost guaranteed, because she didn't have the tools for her anxiety. She had just been medicating it. And then she got off the medication for her pregnancy. Not a great home birth candidate. Not a great person to scare it's never a good idea to scare someone anyway. But yes, I have worked with people who are afraid of giving birth in the hospital. And it's something that I find I want to work against, because you might end up with a transfer, you know. Just like we work with you on your birth plan of like what might happen if you have a C-section, we work with you on your birth plan if you're doing a home birth or a birth center birth about what do you want your transfer to look like if it happens, because they do happen. And we want you to be in control of your birth at all times and say, okay, here's a situation, but you have already made decisions about this, and this is where your comfort levels are. And these are the steps that we're going to take to keep you in as control as possible, which you can't do from a state of fear.
Yeah.
That's something I feel a little passionate about. And I'm just realizing that I feel passionate about it as I'm talking right now. Apparently that's a pet peeve that I have. And in case you're wondering, that client I supported like 6 months ago that they scared. It was 7 months ago. I supported her 7 months ago. But I still, we're friends on Facebook, and her stuff will pop up and I'll still be like, oh, I cannot believe that person called you. That was so inappropriate. Still happens. But you know, I love my clients, and they needlessly put my client through a lot of stress, and she already had anxiety. Not helpful. Anyway, we're moving on. This is not my soapbox. Supposedly. Okay. Next question on the phone. Chapter 8. Have you ever been called out for only presenting the information and not taking a side?
I don't know if I've ever like been called out so much as I could feel frustration, like from my clients if they're asking me my opinion on something, and I just like, well, these are the these are your options. These are your options.
Here's some positive and negative things about them empirically. Yeah. And they want you to say, this is what you should do.
Yeah.
And we can't do that. I actually had a husband on my very first hospital birth ever that I was supporting ever. And he pulled me to the side when he and I were walking to go get some food. And he said, hey, I really think that my wife would do well if you could start giving her some instruction. I mean, we're talking about like breathing and movement. Is there like something specific that you're wanting me to tell her to do? And he goes, well, our last doula just kind of like told her what to do. And like when the doctors would come in and say that they wanted to do something, then the doula would just say what she should do. I was like, that doula practice outside of her scope. I'm so sorry, but I'm not going to do that for you. I will happily give you your options, but I'm not going to tell you what you should do ever. And he was like, okay, good to know that that's not what she's. I was like, no, you don't want my medical advice. I have the same amount of medical school experience that you do. You don't want me telling you what to do medically.
Yeah.
You don't. And there's been times that I have been presenting the sides of information. I say, well, you know, there's this evidence of this, and there's this evidence of this. And then that causes a conversation to happen with the medical professional in the room. And I learn a lot, which is great because they have the medical school. I don't, you know, I've read these articles, but that's not the same as going to school for, what do they go, 8 years? You know?
Yeah.
But yes. And that's just one example. I've been pulled to the side to be told that they would like more instruction. And I've had the number one thing that happens is they'll ask, well, what do you think I should do? And I say, well, here are your options. And they'll say, well, I don't want my options. What do you think I should do? You'll never know. The greatest kept secret in the world. I'm not telling you. I'm not telling you what I think you should do. It's outside of my scope. Yeah, because that's definitely something that I have experienced more than once. Okay, now we're getting into the deep conversation stuff. What has been your experience personally with implicit bias? As she starts talking about how she went to a conference where they started discussing implicit bias in a birth space. Deep thought. Yeah, take a minute. Think about it. it's been something that thankfully I was super blessed to get to start studying with like Rebecca Decker's classes quite a while ago. And she talked a lot about implicit bias, like far past what my doula training did. So that was really helpful that I've had a lot of internal thought and realizations and like quiz taking and all of that jazz, finding out about myself. And then just like observing it as a doula. So it definitely exists. I see it fairly often. I think one of the big things that I see implicit bias wise is my young clients. A lot of nurses assume that because they're young that they can't handle it and that they're being motherly by telling them that they can't handle it and that it's oh so hard. I see that a lot. There's a lot of anti, like, not anti, but assuming that because a mother is young that she has no pain tolerance or doesn't know what she's doing and is frightened, and then causing her to question her pain tolerance and assume that she's frightened, cause her to be frightened when she was fine.
Mm-hmm.
More deep thought. You take. I don't know. I should send these questions out beforehand is what I need to start doing so people can show up and be like, because it's not fair. I've written these so I have the answers because I had time to think about them when I wrote them down.
Mm-hmm.
Well, goodness, Jamie.
Well, trying to think of, gosh, it's been a while since I've been in a birth space. So I'm like trying to remember.
Have you experienced any implicit bias as a pregnant person? I mean, you are currently pregnant.
Oh, certainly.
That's part of the question.
Okay. Well, I guess I can give instances of that. Definitely been, what angers me the most, because I have a history. I used to do a lot of heavy lifting and weight training, and so it always bugs me when people assume that I can't like lift things or do things because I'm pregnant. And they really, actually, I encountered that a lot, just being a rather thin individual most of my life. People assume that I'm not capable of doing physical labor, and it drives me up the wall.
Which is insane. Anybody who's watching this, Jamie is one of the strongest of the directors. And when we go and do something like camping or kayaking, we all hand all the heavy stuff to Jamie. She's our go-to. She can lift it. And like, there's literally one point where I left her and my husband to lift and carry the kayaks up a muddy hill while I left to go do something because I had to go grab the car. Like, I was like, I'll walk, y'all carry. Like, she's fine. She's quite strong. She's skinny, but she's strong. Yeah. I've seen someone do that to you before, and I like felt like you're just like, ugh. I was like, oh no. A poor decision.
There was a time I was working in a cafeteria at college, and you'd have to like move, like whenever I was cleaning off the trays, the stack would get really high, and I had to move them from like the kitchen out to where people can pick them up. And I'd have like some of the older gentlemen that worked there always like, here, let me do that for you, and practically shove me out of the way to do my job. And they would like, ah.
Yeah. That's one that I have also experienced quite a bit of. It's a very annoying one. It's very annoying, those assumptions. Yeah, I was actually told by my midwife that I couldn't pick up anything heavier than 20 pounds for my entire first pregnancy. And I followed that advice, and I lost a lot of muscle mass.
Yeah, you would.
Yeah, because I didn't pick up anything. By the way, you can do the research yourself and look at where that came from, but it's not recent. It's not recent advice. Not that I'll tell you what to do, as I said earlier, but don't pick up 20 pounds because you're pregnant. It's not recent advice.
I mean, personal anecdote, during my second pregnancy, I was lifting, like I was doing like 200-pound squats with a barbell. So, and she went past her due date, and was a 6-hour labor.
Nice. That is something that I want to learn more about, because I've definitely been taught not to use your abs so much. And that I have seen a lot of studies supporting, but lifting is core. I don't know.
I mean, you use your core muscles. It's more of, I mean, it's more of the movement, the type of movements that you're doing, as far as I understand, because you're worried about the diastasis recti, the separation of the abs. So, I mean, there's abs is quite a generic term. You have several muscles in that muscle group. It's the ones that are like right in front in the middle that are more likely that are the ones that you're worried about separating. So if you can focus more on the obliques, and there's also the like transabdominal muscles, which are the ones that support the spine. And that those are like actually help to your abdominal like together, holds it together. So focusing on those should be more beneficial. It's just deprive baby of oxygen.
Sorry. Yes, all of those things. Doing that where you press the space bar to temporarily unmute yourself, because there are 7 children aged 7 and younger running around my house right now. So them and a dog that's barking at everything. So lots of ambient noise in the home. We're a very loud and happy place to be right now. Emphasis on happy. It's been great. It really has. I'm kind of sad they're leaving very soon. It's not okay. Anyway, yeah, so I would say you and I have had plenty of experience with implicit bias. Rebecca Decker does talk a lot on this subject, and I really appreciate all of the work that she has done. There is a Harvard study that I encourage everybody to take, and I'll put that in the notes here, that kind of helps you discover your own implicit bias specifically to race. And it's really awesome at just like self-evaluation. And then also, of course, the more people who take it, then the more people that they have in their study, they're using it to study things and look at trends and stuff. So I highly encourage everyone to do that. And unfortunately, implicit bias for race is extremely common and proven extremely common in birth spaces. I mean, in space, in life in general, but very, very much so in birth spaces. And they do talk about that in this book pretty extensively. We're actually going to read a specific story and kind of talk about that later that really dives into it. But that's another thing that I actually unfortunately have experienced as a doula, witnessing implicit bias from medical staff to my clients. And just it's so disgusting. That's really the only word that I have for it. It's disgusting. And it goes back into my reaction to things where my clients' rights are being violated, and racism is your rights being incredibly violated, is just calling it out and saying it. I say what I see, I say what is in the room, and my clients and I talk beforehand to say, okay, you let me know when you want me to do something, because I don't want to put my experience on you. So, as a white person, I can't tell you what you are experiencing, but if you're experiencing this and you want me to advocate, we make a code word for it. So that's another thing that I have experienced, unfortunately, in birth spaces. Not super often, but it's horrible anytime that it does happen. Or in prenatals. So I had a client that I started just going to all of her doctor's appointments with her, because apparently they needed a white person sitting in the chair. And she said it was completely, all I had to do was show up and just sit in the chair. So, okay. Okay. Have you, or a client that you're experienced racism? That's my next question. So we've already gone there. And how do you handle it? So that's, yes, there I am. I already answered my next question. Yes, I have. And I handle it by using my presence, being an ally as best I can, making sure that my client is in the driver's seat and I'm just supporting them. I'm the backup, not the driver. So they make the decisions of what they want to do about what, and I just support them in that. And then I'm unyielding in that support. That's we sit and have a conversation beforehand. I believe in advocating through preparation. And I've had more than one client or couple even sit me down and say, we're worried about experiencing racism when we go to give birth, and we want to know how you're going to help us with that. So it's horrible that it happens, and I'm always so sad that it happens, but that's how I handle it. I make a plan and I prepare beforehand and then support as best I can.
Yeah. I mean, I haven't experienced very overt racism in the birth space yet. Most of my clients of color I've supported virtually at this point. But yeah, I've taken Kristen's training and I feel adequately prepared to handle the situation.
Well, good. I'm glad that my training has left you feeling prepared. That's awesome. Honestly, feeling confident and ready to advocate for somebody and having those tools is a huge portion of the battle. And just finding, they're dependent on you to advocate if that is what they are expecting from you. If, because I'll have clients that before you talk to me say, okay, I want to start by preparing you to advocate for yourself. And they say, it's not going to happen. Quite frankly, it's not going to happen. And you just need to have tools, and being ready for that is a huge portion of it. And just telling them how you plan on handling it makes people just feel so much better. The effects of weathering on the body. They don't even have to experience the implicit bias or the racism in the birth space. When you're talking about, people who are obese, or, they've been given a hard time about their age or marital status or color of their skin or religion. There's just so many things. They don't even have to experience
microaggressions of like every day.
Yes. They don't even have to experience that in the birth space in order to experience the weathering effect of it. If you don't know what that is, you need to Google, and you need to watch a lot of videos about it. If you are a birth worker that does not know what weathering is, you are behind and you need to catch up. For sure. That is not, if you're sign up with us, take a training with Moxa, you need it if you don't know what weathering is. So, starting from there and then just giving them a plan for how you're going to help can just ease that stress that's on their internal organs. I've got someone who's going to have my back once I get there, and this is their plan for how to do it. I know how they're going to have my back is a huge part of advocacy before you even get there. I prefer to stop the issue before it happens. That's my preference. Call it out before it even happens. Do the preparation beforehand. That's my hill to die on. For sure. That's my passion. One of them, apparently. I'm very passionate tonight.
Discussions.
It was this. Okay, chapter 8 and chapter 9 are heavy. They're heavy. It's a lot to be passionate. There's a lot to be passionate about in this book, but chapters 8 and 9, a lot to be passionate about. And this, when you've been to births where you've seen people experience it, or you've experienced it yourself, it's just a whole new level of grit, I guess. Okay, last chapter. Are you ready? Yeah. We are going to discuss Caroline's birth experience and hospital culture. So let me get. Okay, here we go. A 32-year-old mother of 3, Caroline, had decided that she wanted a different birth experience the 4th time around. The first 3 times she had epidurals, given birth on her back, and had routine episiotomies. This time she wanted to give birth in an upright position, use natural pain management techniques, and avoid episiotomy. But when she asked her doctor about her birth plan, he said it was not possible at the hospital where he practiced. So halfway through pregnancy, Caroline switched doctors to one who said that he was happy to support her birth plan. And everything she was asking for was normal practice in his hospital for healthier for her and baby. Sounds great. We're always happy to help switch to another birth provider at any point when you find that it's not working out. So that's fantastic. The hospital where this doctor worked, in fact, had been heavily marketing their support of natural or unmedicated birth. Specifically, the hospital's website and marketing materials offered autonomy, beautiful birthing suites with birthing tubs, specially trained nurses, and support for a personalized birth plan. Awesome. But when Caroline arrived at the hospital in active labor, none of these options materialized. Her doctor was not on call. She was placed in a room without a tub. The nurse ordered her to get on her bed on her back so that Caroline could be placed on a continuous electronic fetal monitor instead of the wireless monitor Caroline had requested. Nobody seemed to know or care anything about Caroline's birth plan, including her specific request and recommendation of doctor to have freedom of movement. Caroline kept questioning why she was being kept on her back. The nurse ignored her and demanded that Caroline obey her orders. At this point, Caroline was in the midst of heavy labor without an epidural. The contractions had gotten intense. Instinctively, she got off her back and turned onto her hands and knees position in bed, which was much more comfortable for her. Her water broke and the baby started crowning. That's when everything fell apart. Ordering her on her back, Caroline's nurse grabbed one of her wrists and pulled it out from under her, forcing Caroline to turn on her side so she would not fall on her belly, while another nurse joined in the effort to put Caroline on her back. Caroline later wrote, "I desperately tried to flip back to my hands and knees, struggling against the nurses to do so. The nurse held me down and pressed my baby's head into my vagina to delay delivery as he was trying to come out." Okay, The nurse held baby Jack's head for 6 minutes. Ow. Until a doctor walked into the room. At that point, the nurse released her hands and Jack came out immediately. As a result of the obstetric violence Caroline experienced, including the awkward position she was kept in while her baby was being held inside her, she experienced a permanent injury. So that's Caroline's story, which is just horrible. Absolutely horrible.
I mean, just hearing the story is traumatic. Experiencing it is just like, so.
Yeah.
It's awful.
Yes, that it is. And I have to say, I have not seen anything even close to this in any of the hospitals that I have worked in. I've never seen anybody physically trying to force a client into something by any means. I've seen a lot of verbal pressure, a lot of peer pressure, a lot of fear mongering, but not physically forcing. I hope that this is abnormal. And I also think that we've made a lot of steps toward making this even more abnormal. So that's good. I want to preface that, but also this does happen. And it is really interesting. Rebecca then goes into talking about hospital culture, of how the nurses more than likely were operating in a state of fear themselves, because these people more than likely got involved in helping birth babies because they wanted to help birth babies, not because they wanted to force people down onto their sides and hold babies in. But they were probably very afraid of the baby to be born before the doctor came into the room, which means that they were probably, we're making a lot of guesses here, they were probably experiencing what's called horizontal violence and top-down violence in their hospital cultures. They were probably afraid of the doctors and what the trouble that they would get in. And they were probably afraid of what would happen, like if the charge nurse found out that the baby was born before the doctor came into the room. Things like that, making it that much harder. And that's something that I always kind of think about when I have a nurse that isn't necessarily, being on the team. They're not working toward the same type of birth that everybody else in the room seems to be going toward. I always think, what are they afraid of? When they're actively doing something like this, I think, what is their culture? What happened to them right before they came in here that has them so afraid of my client pushing on their hands and knees? What's the hospital policy that's keeping them so intensely from doing this? But in that story, what I find incredibly interesting is when they're talking to the nurses later on the stand, they don't remember her birth, which is horrifying, because that means that as much as I'm saying, I hope that this is abnormal and I haven't personally seen it, apparently they had to the point that they don't remember it.
It wasn't abnormal for them.
No, apparently not. And this was supposed to be the good hospital to go to.
Yeah. I think that, as much as we talk about the hospital policies sometimes being the limiting factor, sometimes you have these administrative people who changed the policies to have this good outward facing or marketing material, whereas the culture of the hospital itself has not changed to go along with that. So it could be either end could be fighting change.
Yeah, exactly. And, she specifically said that she didn't end up getting to work with the doctor that she wanted. And who knows what this birth story would have been if that hadn't been the case. It's so cute. You can't see it, but my daughter is chasing, my little 5-year-old is chasing the little 2-year-old around, and my 5-year-old is saying, "I'm gonna get you, I'm gonna get you," and the little she's and running away. It's loud, but it's adorable. So sorry, it's loud. But there's nowhere for me to go. So here we are. And I'm not gonna tell them they can't play together. Especially when they're about to be separated until Christmas.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fine. Try not to dwell on it. Anyway, yeah, so I think that because that is a well-known, there's a few well-known cases supported by birth monopoly and that whole advocacy lawyer group, which is fantastic, improvedbirth.org, and all of them that have brought some of these stories to head. And the reason that they get the attention that they do, according to Babies Are Not Pizzas, is the permanent injury aspect of it. But if you experience something where there isn't a permanent injury aspect of it that affects your entire life, or you're just like not sure if you can get to that level, there's other things that you can do besides like taking it into a large court case. But there's all kinds of things that you can do to prevent something like this. I think that there's an interesting balance when you're discussing something like this. That was so unbelievably wrong and horrifying and terrifying, and the fact that they don't even remember it is so bad. And we need to do something about it. But like we were saying earlier, we don't want you to be afraid if you need medical intervention, or if you don't feel comfortable having a home birth or a birth center birth, or those options just quite simply aren't available to you, that stories like this cause you to live in fear before going to your hospital. There's all kinds of things that you can do to kind of help with that. It's an imperfect system, but there are people that can help you through that. And there's all kinds of trainings. If you are the support system, there's all kinds of things like support systems for you as well. If you experience something like this as a doula, if this was my client and that's happening and the nurses are holding her down and there's nothing that I can do about it, or I have a freeze, because we're people too. Maybe I have a freeze response and I don't do anything about it, and I have this horrible guilt or something like that. There's support systems for you, and there's people that you can reach out to. If you need help with that, please reach out to me. I can send you to people that can help you, hopefully, or send you to resources that can help you, which is the main thing that I was coming away from that. When I read a story like that, like it hits, and then I think, okay, like now what?
Yeah.
What was your response?
So whenever I'm talking to my husband about like these types of stories, he's always like where was their partner like in that situation? And I have to I know that like, one, not everyone has a support person in the room with them. And also like their partner may just be scared and like worried about her and the baby, and think that, the medical staff is just trying to keep them safe, and they're just assuming that that's what's going on, and that's how those types of things end up happening. Even if you have like your partner in the room with you. So like if that's something that you're really concerned about, it's like if your partner is involved and can like kind of learn these advocacy steps to try and stop something like this from happening like before it happens. It's like that and having a doula who is trained in the same way. I think that those are when you're with a client that's nervous about these things or scared, that would be like the first steps that you'd probably want to take. This is my thoughts.
Yep, I completely agree on all of those things. Okay, so now we're getting more into nitty gritty even further. Secondary trauma and compassion fatigue for birth workers. She starts talking about how her friend, the founder of Birth Monopoly, started experiencing some secondary trauma and compassion fatigue. And we actually, I do love that she put both of those together, because we did actually have a workshop where we sat down, and the name of the workshop was Beating Burnout, Secondary Trauma and Compassion Fatigue. So just right there, I was like, yeah, exactly. And what she was talking about lined up with that workshop really well. And I have to say, it's so real. Compassion fatigue as a birth worker is so real. And when you start experiencing it, it's good to have some tools, have some friends that will recognize it with you and be like, hey, there should have been some empathy there. Or you seem like you're getting mentally tired. And we need to do some steps to get you back there. Have you ever experienced compassion fatigue, or like absorbed the trauma that you were in this space when it happened to somebody else?
I'd say I have a little bit, but it's gosh, I don't know where I was going with that. I think that it's helpful. One of the things that's helpful is like if you are in a birth space that there is like something you perceive to be traumatic happens. Sometimes whenever you meet with the client afterwards and they're telling their version of the birth story and what they remember, it isn't as traumatic from their perspective, and that can be a little like help lift a little bit of weight. Just just knowing that like it's like sometimes even just having like your presence there, and like maybe something that could have been traumatic, but just having another person in there that was like experiencing it with them helps like relieve some of that.
Yeah, for sure. And I just want to add that, birth workers that are watching this or following along, when you do those perinatals with your clients and they tell you that what their experience was not as negative as what you were thinking, it's not a good time to tell them that it should have been negative. If they went through their experience and it wasn't traumatizing to them, or they aren't ready to admit that it was, it's not your job to tell them that it was traumatizing to them or to try to force them into some form of action and response. That's, you can leave your name and number with them, and if they decide that that's something that they want to do later, they can contact you. But just as a little note there, I felt there was one specific time that I really felt the urge. What my experience in the birth space was traumatic, and I was actively trying to get it to stop, but my client was okay with it. So there's only so much you can do when the client's okay, when you're like, all right, well, I'm so uncomfortable with this, but it's not my body, and she gave consent and she has all of the information in front of her, and okay, I get to just stand here and experience this and feel complicit because I'm standing here, but she's okay with it. And then later I was talking to her and she's like, yeah, that was a little uncomfortable. And I wanted to be like, let's do something about it, but she's like, but I was just, I was fine. Okay. Well, if you change your mind about that, it was fine part, you know how to reach me. And it's just, I think that that's an important part of our job, also recognizing with compassion fatigue and all of that. You know, you can overstep.
Yeah.
In that way.
And I mean, that's a really like having that group of doulas, that a team available to you to help you decompress is super helpful.
Oh my gosh, yes. Yeah, I was texting my team within like 10 minutes afterward, because obviously I was present. And then later, like when I got out of that birth, I was just like, okay, this is my team that I have signed permission to talk to you about this in explicit detail, and I am going to like phone call as I am driving home what just happened. Yeah, that's huge. And that in itself is incredibly important for our mental health, because I needed to decompress after experiencing that. I had absorbed a lot of secondary trauma. I was very upset, and I did not want to put that back on my client, and I did not want to leave it in me. So having that team that I had signed permission to talk to was instrumental. It would also be good if you have it available to you to have a therapist, because you can talk to them explicitly as well. So somebody who can help you talk through that if you don't have a team. If you work with the ministry, you have a team, because your mental health is important to us.
And having that team to help identify if you are like showing compassion fatigue, like to help identify it.
Yeah, this year has been crazy for me. I lost my house to a house fire, and several things in my personal life have just been like, oh my gosh. And I do experience compassion fatigue sometimes. Thankfully not with my birth clients, but I'll experience it with my poor coworkers. Love you, Jamie. Where I'll just be like, y'all get over it. Reminded by my coworkers, hey love, you're showing the signs. Your compassion fatigue is showing, and you need to do some self-care and talk it out with somebody, because you're tired and you're being rude. And a lot of times that's where that comes from. And I think that people don't necessarily talk about that with a lot of medical professionals. We are so much more focused on mental health, you know, as doulas. I hope, you know, not everybody would be. I'm not going to try and say all doulas are, but at the ministry, we're very focused on mental health. And so we do keep that in mind. And I just imagine living at my level of stress all the time as a nurse or as a doctor, and then having nobody ever tell me to go, your compassion fatigue is showing, you need to go take care of this. Yeah. I feel like I wouldn't be the nicest person. Jamie's like, no, you wouldn't be. I've seen your compassion fatigue. When it happens, I get very apathetic. I get very, well, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. The phrase I use a lot, tough cookies. It's rough. Get over it. And then I'm like, okay, Kristen, it's not how we act. Go sit in the corner. Drink a latte in the corner by yourself in the quiet, because that is self-care when you are a mom. That's how we recover our compassion fatigue.
Drink an entire cup of coffee while it's still warm, and not stick it back in the microwave 4 or 5 times.
Never. When I was recording my Monday morning coffee this morning, my coffee was cold. I went to take a sip of it because I wanted it to be like Kermit the Frog sip. It did the eyebrow and everything, and I was like, ugh, gosh, it's not even hot. It's life. All right. Very last question, chapter 9. Have you ever felt censored in your advocacy work as a birth worker? Or as a part of the ministry even?
I mean, censored in what way? Or
So she talks about how she slowly came to this realization that she couldn't work at the university that she's at anymore because they start censoring her, saying that she can never say anything negative about hospitals because in their birth spaces, because she works at one. And someone dug up a comment that she had made where it was very like, none of the hospitals in our area support evidence-based practices that she had made in a comment thread 2 years previous. So someone was coming after her.
Mhm.
And she had this realization that she was never going to actually be able to do what she wanted with evidence-based birth and work at the hospital that she was at. She had to kind of pick. So that was a pretty high level of censorship, but there's all kinds of levels of like, well, you can't say that because you're repping the ministry, or you know, you can't have that opinion because you're a doula.
I mean, yeah, being in the position of a doula, sometimes you have to be careful about being too outspoken about different topics because you want to be open to all sorts of people and all sorts of like birth decisions. So, I mean, not being overly judgmental, especially in a public forum where people like see it and be like, maybe a previous client could see you being outspoken about a particular birth choice and could be hurt because it was like, well, what did they think whenever they were at my birth? And it's like, I mean, holding certain positions for like what you do for yourself versus just being generally outspoken about a birth choice is a line that you kind of need to walk as a doula.
Yeah. I think the biggest censorship, just to use that word because that's what we're saying, that I have felt is when it comes to opinions on things like that I made for my personal family and wanting to get on social media, like something will come on and be like, yeah, I totally agree with that, but it's about birth. And I'm friends with my clients that have made a different decision about that in the book. Because I'm not going to unfriend you just because you had your baby, you know, and maybe I'm friends with you right now and you're still pregnant. And maybe you're making a decision about whether or not you want to circumcise, or you're making a decision about whether or not you want to have vitamin K. And it is not my place to tell you. And just because I won't tell you in person, you know, if you say, what's your opinion on vitamin K? What's your opinion on it? And I say, well, I have these great articles that I can send you that actually has some really fantastic information that tells you about both sides. And then you get on my Facebook and I've got something posted that is extremely opinionated about vitamin K. Well, I just did all that, didn't I? You know? So that's probably the strongest way that I feel, but that's a self-censorship really, because I want to hold myself to that standard. The ministry is not going to get on my Facebook and say, like the hospital did with her, you're not allowed to have an opinion about Hep B shot. You know, take this off your Facebook because you're associated with us. We're not going to do that. So I don't know if censorship is necessarily the right word for it, but that's probably the only. I've experienced self-censorship. That's it. That I am aware of. But that comes from working for yourself.
Yeah.
You're your own boss.
So childbirth together very strongly since
childbirth together, man. They're so rough. They don't let me have an opinion about anything. If it's public, all I can say is that mothers are strong and that birth is natural. And other than that, I'm not allowed to have an opinion. All my articles have to be unbiased. But I think that's just a standard that I wish that all birth workers were held to. There would be a lot of there would be a lot less shame in the birth world, and people would be a lot more forthcoming on asking questions. And I can't imagine putting the amount of trust that clients put into a doula and forming that relationship, because it is. By the time you're done with a birth, you guys are close. You've been through some stuff together, and then to get on and be like, oh my gosh, this person that I trusted so much was judging me for this. That would be devastating.
Heartbreaking.
My sister agrees with me. I have doulaed 3 of her births. I've attended all 5, but I was not a doula for the first 2. So I've doulaed 3 of them. And I think that they're all wonderful and beautiful and supported everything that she did. And I have no opinions or judgment on any of it. And I think that it would be horrifying for it to be any different. But like I said, self-censorship. But I have a feeling that as we get bigger, if I do ever go back and watch this again later, there's a possibility that I'll be like, man, that was nice, when I was only being censored by myself instead of being censored by the general populace. So I'm sure that will be a thing too.
Yeah.
We live in a very censorship heavy culture, which is great. And by great, I mean crappy. I get it, but it's also crappy. Okay. Ending on a positive note there. Oh, 1 second. Talk about something about censorship.
Well, I have to say that there's a lot of the political environment has caused our ministry Facebook page has to be fairly careful about what we're posting. Like as a group, we don't really censor individuals, but what we are posting in our name is has to be carefully considered.
Yeah, yes, we do. And a large portion of that is just, like I was saying before, not wanting to make people feel judged. If you might post something and you just think that you're sending out good information, but it's biased and kind of worded rudely. And this person who was going to come to you for help is not going to do it anymore. So yeah, you're definitely right. We definitely try to avoid that. Really careful.
Be very careful about actually reading the entirety of articles before you share them.
Because sometimes at the end, you're like, whoa, just kidding. I was with you until I was not. And then I was not. Or there's so often that I'll see these things where they're posted, we're like, did you know? And then I'm like, you know why people don't know that? Because it's wrong. And, it's a pretty picture that sounds right, or it's shocking. There's one going around about circumcision right now. It's like, did you know? And it's like showing a picture of how they cut off half the penis and listing the things that it cuts off that's not the foreskin. That's like, people don't know that because it's not true. So, being careful about sharing that, but also don't find that necessarily to be censorship, because once again, that's just being careful about your sources. And the words. I think if you get on and there are no sources and it's some kind of shock thing, probably not true. Probably not. Or like the breastfeeding one that was really popular around this time last year, that my milk ducts make the inside of my breast into a flower. No, they don't. Your milk ducts don't look like a flower. They're beautiful and wonderful, but they're not a flower. And I saw so many doulas share that.
Yeah. I don't think I ever saw that one.
You never saw that one? It was everywhere. And it was lowering my opinion of people drastically. It was everywhere. And I was just like, ladies, no. It takes 10 seconds to Google what, if you have never taken any breastfeeding education, or your breastfeeding education didn't cover that, because sometimes they don't. So it doesn't cover what things look like and doula. They're just teaching you, these are some of the problems you might encounter and here's how to work with it. So I could see that. No one's taught you the anatomy of the breast. Okay. But maybe they saw it shared by other doulas that they respected and they assumed. Screw from there. But I was highly annoyed. And then finally, like, the correction started making the round where it was like, people are sharing this and it's wrong. And this is what it actually looks like. And this is right. And it's like, oh, thank God. Just started sharing that everywhere. Yes, this is what the inside of your breasts look like. Not that it matters, except that it's wrong. And if that's censorship, I'm okay with it. But as far as like opinions go, we tend to let you have your own opinion. And I tend to feel relatively free to have an opinion, and enough so that I don't think that any pressure that I do feel is necessarily bad, because it's not to the point that I feel like I can't say anything, but it is to the point that I want to make sure that what I'm saying is factual and that I'm open to learning. And I'm not saying things that are like, this is my opinion and it's law.
It's just like making sure that you're speaking in a respectful tone.
Yeah.
Like having that accountability when discussing things on social media is kind of nice, honestly.
Yeah. Wouldn't it be great if everyone had that kind of accountability on social media, where it's like, you can't just spout off things and say things and share things that are unkind and not, there's no attempt at growth, where you don't feel like you need to just end the conversation by saying, I don't think either of us are growing from this. And you're like, and I'm not going to say things on social media that reflect poorly because I've got the ministry on my Facebook page. Or in my case, I am wearing a ministry t-shirt and I've got the camera turned so you can see the t-shirt specifically in my photo. So I have chosen that level of representation. I better be good 100% of the time that I am online. Is that a picture of KCWM's ministry next to everything I say? I did that to myself, and happily so. I wear that shirt with pride all the time. It's kind of ridiculous the number of times that like someone will take a picture of me and I'm like, and I'm wearing that shirt again. I must really like that shirt. Is that one and the blue one that I wear all the time. I'm wearing a black one that says Inhale, Exhale on Facebook, and then I've got the blue one that's the pregnant person with the heart in her belly, and it says, you were made for this. Mm-hmm. Those two. Apparently, I just switch between those two and don't wear anything else except right now.
They end up in the laundry every week.
They do. I'm a little bit nervous. I feel like I need to buy like the exact same shirts because they're going to get holes in them at this rate. But I can always just order more. I'm so sorry. 1 second. My son wants to know how dangerous he can play on the bed right now because he wants to swing and fly and jump. They learn nothing from monkeys jumping on the bed song, nothing except that they can jump on beds. But it's very cute.
Yeah, that's what my kids learned too, actually earlier, because my daughter got a new bed and they're like, and we just got it set up and they're like, let's play monkeys jumping on the bed.
The song did not do what it was designed for. It didn't. It is encouraging bed jumping. People who wrote that song that are long dead, just so you know. Does not assist a single parent ever.
It just makes our lives harder.
All right. That was good. Okay, so those were my kind of takeaways, the things that really stood out to me and that I thought of, the questions that came into my head for these chapters. And we are going to do one more book club next month where we finish out Babies Are Not Pizzas. And then we are going to start Ghost Belly. Yes, that's what it's called.
Yes.
So we can.
Yeah, I have it right here.
Well, look at you. I need to, because I keep getting these books that we're doing them the reading for something. And so I buy them and I get them on my Kindle. And it's not easy to run a book club from a Kindle. It's very convenient to read the book when you're out and about on a Kindle, but to reference back when you're trying to go to specific page numbers and whatnot, I just borrowed Jamie's. I used to have a physical copy of this. It was sitting on my bookshelf in the house that I lost in a fire. So I did own the physical copy. And then the second time around, I was like, I'll just put it on my Kindle. And I mean, if you guys are following this, you saw me the first week I tried to do that from my Kindle. There was a lot of, what page was that on? I cannot find this. The Kindle didn't say page numbers on it. It was a whole thing. So I will order a physical copy of it. I currently have a Kindle copy of Ghost Belly, but I will fix it. I will get the, I will run it appropriately. Maybe someone else can run the next book club. No, I'm just kidding. It's fine. I enjoy it. Maybe someone else can
always borrow my physical copy again.
Yes.
This one's actually hard to get in physical copy right now.
So oh no.
It's like not in print right now.
Do we need to not do that book then? If no one can get it?
I know that Shelly was having problems finding it.
Oh, dang. All right. We'll discuss this further later. Okay. Thank you so much for joining us. See you next month.